Hello, friends, and I'm excited because I have had the opportunity to sit down with our Urbana Mayor, Dianne Marlin. She's volunteered an hour of her time to come and share with us about what's happening in our community, the real situations that we're facing, the beautiful things about Urbana, the problems our community is facing, and what it looks like to be meaningfully involved with making a better future. And so, Mayor Marlin, first I just want to say thank you for joining. I know your time is very busy. You've got a lot of things you're juggling, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Just wanted to start with, tell me about how you came to Urbana. Have you lived here for a long time, or what's that story?
Yes, I've lived here for a long time. I came here as a student, and I was one of the many thousands of people, I think, who came to Urbana-Champaign for an education, and I was lucky enough to find a life here.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I know that story as well. I came here for grad school and just fell in love with it. Wasn't expecting to.
Yeah.
That's so good. So you've been here for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Have you always thought that your life would be aimed towards politics?
No, I mean, if you had asked me 15 years ago if I'd be sitting in this seat today as Mayor of Urbana, I would have said, I would have thought you were crazy. I mean, that was not
really
part of my grand scheme. My path in this community brought me to this job, which I always share this message with people because a lot of young people especially, and I never pass up an opportunity to go talk to schools and students because sometimes the kids think, oh, you have to start out as a 20-year-old thinking you're going to run for office and serve your community in that way. And I always tell them, no, you know, your life experiences bring you to a place, and that's what happened with me. So, so my story is I was a 19-year-old student. I came from, grew up on a farm, came from a small town, so this was the big city, and I was lost in this huge university. But I joined Students for Environmental Concerns as a sophomore, and one of the environmental issues back in the 70s, which is when I arrived, was fighting to save Allerton Park from being flooded by a dam that was planned on the Sangamon River. So through that, I joined the Committee on Allerton Park. I met many people in the community, you know, faculty, staff, community members. I met my future husband, and in that process, I discovered that there was a wonderful community outside the, you know, boundaries of the campus. And that was my link to the greater community, and one thing led to another, and here I am 40-some years later.
Wow. So you kind of got involved with politics by accident at
Yeah,
first.
yeah, I don't say it's accident. I think there was a path, and each decision point in that path, you choose a different direction, and it led me here. I went to grad school. We had a family. I was very involved in the schools for many years. When my kids graduated, we moved to a different house. I became involved in neighborhood issues. We're very concerned about, at that time, some landlords who weren't maintaining and managing property well, and there was also some proposed development in Orchard Downs, and so I co-founded a neighborhood organization called the Southeast Urbana Neighborhood Association, and through that, I had more contact with city officials and learned, you know, really got more involved in city government issues. When the opportunity came to a city council seat opened in my ward, I was encouraged to run, and I did, and won, and I served 8 years on the Urbana City Council, and that is where that was invaluable as far as the amount of as far as what I learned about how the city ran. And I also then really grew to believe that there were some things that needed to change, and that I could be of service in that way, and that I had ideas on what I thought we as a city should be doing.
Yeah.
So I ran for mayor and was elected about 2.5 years ago.
Wow. Oh, I love that. So feed back to me. What I'm hearing is you said, I want to help make this better. Then I want to help make this better. Then I want to help make this better. And next thing you know, you're helping make our community better, really.
Yeah, I guess I like to fix things.
Yeah.
so that's, yeah.
Well, I love it.
But I think that's the motivation of most people who are in politics today, especially at the local level. It's how can I make my community better? How can I serve my community? And ultimately, how do I help people? I mean, you know, we're in this, it's not a business, we're in this service to help the people.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love that. So speaking of this community and making it better, what are some of the things that you just feel are really beautiful about this community? Like what makes our community unique and special, and what lights your eyes up when you see it?
Well, I always say, you know, if you ask me where my home was, my first answer would be, well, my home that's in my heart is the farm I grew up on in LaSalle County, but Urbana is my home. So what I love about Urbana, it's small enough to have that small town feel. You know your neighbors. You know, you go to the grocery store. You know, see people. You go to the farmers market. You run into folks you know. But because of the presence of the University of Illinois, it has a global reach, and you have so many of the benefits of a much larger community. People have called it, you know, a micro-urban community. But what I love is the freshness that each new year brings when we have so many new students come. I love the diversity of the community. Nearly 20% of our population was born in a different country. Now, many of those are, most of those are folks associated, you know, faculty, staff, and students at the U of I, but many are not. And this constant renewal and refreshing of our community makes it a very special place. We have neighborhood schools, we're walkable and bikeable. We have many, many amenities that you'd find in a much larger city without the traffic or the expense. And it's just a great place to raise a family and to pursue your goals. And, you know, we are working to get that message out to people who come here. And like I said, I think the influx of folks into the community is a real resource for us. We have very low unemployment rate, but that said, we still need, there's a segment of the community who still needs to have jobs that allows them to live in safe, decent housing and, you know, purchase the things that they need. And there's need here too, but you know, we're relatively affordable compared to cities on the coast and or in the larger communities. So there's a lot of advantages here.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, thank you. I mean, each of those things you say, I'm like, yeah, oh yeah, it is like that. Yeah. Oh, it is like that. And
I mean, sometimes you have to just stop and look around and say, wow, look what we have.
Yeah.
Look what we have, and celebrate what we have.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. I wasn't expecting to fall in love with it either. And it's a great place. So you had mentioned some of the challenges we face as a community, and I'd just love to hear you expound a little bit about those.
It's the same challenges that you see anywhere. You know, most people, for many people, they're financially secure. They have good jobs. We need good paying jobs where a person can earn enough money to support themselves, support a family, afford decent housing, and the things that they need. So while we do have a low unemployment rate, we still need jobs that will support people, and that's a challenge. For some people in the community, housing is a critical issue. We have people who are homeless, we have people who are housing insecure, who are on the verge of losing housing. So, you know, the basics of housing, jobs, a network of support, those are some of the needs that we're looking at. As a city, we also have to look ahead to the future. It's like, what do we want to be 20 years from now or 40 years from now? We're dealing with we need to have more resiliency in terms of climate change. We need more resiliency in terms of our ability to withstand the next recession, which you know everyone says is coming. And that's one of the reasons I ran, was to get us back on a sound financial footing, because we weren't. So we have to look to today's needs, but we also have to plan for the future. And we're trying to do both.
Wow, okay. So just to kind of feed back to you, or make sure I'm hearing you correctly, so there's job needs, and continuing to have stable jobs that can really support families, I think would be
Yes.
If I'm hearing you right. There's housing needs. I think we had talked a little bit about education a little bit
Absolutely,
beforehand too.
yes.
So talk to me about that.
Well, that's the key to long-term success in life, and so we really need to be supporting our schools and their efforts, and supporting families and children so they can focus on education. So
Yeah.
that's a great need as well. And the city of Urbana works very closely with the Urbana School District
Okay.
and the Urbana Park District for programming and services and support.
Okay. So education, a few more long range things. Any other kind of critical things that are on your radar for these are the challenges our city's facing?
Another big challenge for us is the ongoing gun violence in the community. Now, we've been working very closely through the Community Coalition and many different local communities and organizations. The troubling trend we're seeing in the last couple of years is increasing use of guns among our teenagers and gun violence in the 13, 14, 15-year-old population. So that's a very, very troubling trend and something we need to focus on. And it stems from the just insanely easy access to guns. If you asked a kid on the street today if they could get a gun, the answer would be yes.
Wow.
It's insanely easy
No
in
kidding.
access, and that's another issue that we are trying to face as a community.
Wow. Amazing. Phew. Anything else that's on your mind for other things? I mean, we can kind of sit here and imagine we know the real
We
challenges.
can talk for
but
hours.
You're in the trenches. You see it all front and center. So.
Well, I can back up to as a city, from a city government standpoint, we're focused, as I think I mentioned, getting ourselves on a sound financial footing. When I came into office, we were facing a $2.5 million structural budget deficit. And why am I focusing on finances? Well, unless we have a sound, unless our city is financially sound and we have a firm foundation, we are not going to be able to provide the programs and services and do what we need to do for our community. So we had a $2.5 million structural deficit. This means our ongoing recurring expenses were growing faster than our recurring revenue, and the gap was growing over time. So we've implemented, and we are in the middle of a plan to eliminate that deficit. We've reduced spending, we've reorganized departments, we've focused on core services, and we've had reduced staffing by about 10 full-time equivalent positions through a voluntary retirement program plus some painful staffing reductions. And we have implemented a number of things that have made us more efficient and effective. And we'll also be looking at some revenue increases, which are tax increases, strategic tax increases. And we should be, if everything goes as planned, we will have eliminated that deficit by the end of the next fiscal year.
Oh,
so within
fantastic.
3 years.
Wow.
That is going to be a huge for getting us where we need to be. We've also had to restore funding to our police and fire pensions, and we rebuilt our city reserves to the minimum required by our own financial guidelines. So that was one of my major goals for my first term, was to just reverse our troubling trend toward financial instability and get us back on the path. So we will be there.
All right.
So I'm
Great
very proud
work.
of that.
Wow.
We've also restored professional administration to the city. We hired a city administrator and filled that position that had been vacant for over 10 years, and that's critical. And we're also planning for the future. I mentioned the need to build resiliency in all ways into our city, and so we are going to be revising the comprehensive plan next year, which is how our land use and what our neighborhoods look like. That will be started next year, first time since 2005. We're updating our stormwater master plan, which is, how the rainwater runoff is carried away. That hasn't been done since 1980, so before computers.
Wow.
We currently are in the middle of assessing the condition of our streets in Urbana, so we're doing a pavement condition assessment, first time ever. And we are also in the middle of our facilities master planning, which is evaluating the condition of every property that we own, as well as how are we using space, and how are people working together, and how will they need to work together in the future. And through all of this, we're trying to be flexible and adaptable, and trying to envision, what are going to be the needs of the future as well as the current needs. But for the first time ever, we will have real-time, accurate information on everything below our streets, on the streets, and above the streets at the same time. And that's going to provide the basis for making decisions on how we allocate resources and how we provide the services going forward.
Yeah.
I come from a research background, so I believe in having some data-informed decisions.
Yeah. Wow, you've been busy.
We have.
And in the midst of all of that, scaling back finances and all of that, I'm impressed.
Well, we have tremendous in terms of our internal resources, our employees are just rock stars, and we have tremendous employees who work very hard, and nobody does this alone. This is, I bet, 250 people who are working very hard and making sacrifices and pulling together in service to the community.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So in the midst of all of these different layers of things that are being worked on and problems that you're seeing, what does involvement towards creating a better future look like? How can we as a Vineyard family really be partnering with the things that you're guiding our community into a better future? What does that look like?
Well, if you have $2 million a year, I'd be happy to take that.
We'll start praying.
Okay. Yeah, I join you in that. Involvement can be on many levels, and I'm gonna back up to the one thing I didn't talk about was we don't operate in a vacuum. So we operate within the state of Illinois context. We also operate within the political context of the federal government. And one thing I always like to share with people is how much decisions at the federal and state level impact what we can do as a community. And a couple of examples are, I'll go back to housing as an example. Every year since I've taken office, I've had to write letters to our U.S. senators and congressmen and the White House asking them not to zero out funding for Housing and Urban Development, Department of Housing and Urban Development, and our Community Development Block Grant funds. These are the funds, federal funds, that come to cities that help us directly deal with the problems of homelessness and housing insecurity, vouchers from HUD, building affordable housing. We work with the Housing Authority of Champaign County, and a couple of projects in the planning stages are an apartment building for seniors and persons with disabilities in East Urbana. That is directly dependent on federal funding. Another project on Learman Avenue, where the Urbana townhomes used to be, would be a mixed income, but including affordable units. Those federal funds are what help our communities deal with our housing issues, and yet every year the current administration has threatened to zero out the budget. We shouldn't have to beg for funds for meeting basic needs like that. The Community Development Block Grant funds are another critical resource that cities use to improve neighborhoods, fight blight in neighborhoods. We buy lots that we then donate to Habitat for Humanity. We've partnered with Habitat for Humanity and have built 52 single-family homes in Urbana, which allow people to transition from rental housing to being homeowners. That's completely dependent on community development block grant funds. We use those funds for helping other social service agencies, for helping seniors renovate and repair their homes so they can stay in their homes and age in place. So we're constantly fighting for funds, you know, that we need to help people. So we don't operate in a vacuum. Same thing with gun violence. It's going to be impossible to really get much progress on the fundamental problems related to gun violence unless we have support from the federal and state government. In 2017, deaths from guns violence exceeded, for the first time ever, deaths from traffic accidents. And 60% of those deaths were suicide. And that is all related to the very easy access to firearms. And until we have some common sense regulations, not restrictions, regulations on guns, I think it's going to be very difficult at the local level to really achieve what we need to achieve. So anyway, we don't operate in a context, or in a vacuum. Sorry.
Yeah. So in the midst of all of that context,
yes,
you know, so you're doing what you can to the extent that you can.
And we're doing a lot, actually.
And you just listed, you are doing a lot. How can we help? So let's say I'm an attender of the Vineyard Church of Central Illinois, and I feel like, wow, this community is beautiful. I want to be part of making it even better. What would you tell me to do as an individual?
Well, there's a lot that individuals can do. I always like to encourage folks to think about children. It's the kids of the community who can really need extra support and help. So as I mentioned before we got started, there's a couple of churches who actually have adopted schools in Urbana. They work closely with the administration. You just don't go in and take over a school, but they work closely with the school district and are doing things to support the students and teachers. So for example, on the first day of school, we welcomed the kids to school. The church was helping spruce up the teacher's lounge, so it's a little place for respite for the faculty and staff. You can serve as a mentor. They're always looking for mentors. Always looking. I know my Rotary Club donates funds, through our Red Shoe Fund, donates money for winter clothing. So they're meeting basic needs of kids in the schools. We have a high number of children in the school who are living in poverty level conditions, and the need is great there. And I know you as a church are, have your food bank, and you're working with other agencies. So that's one thing. The emergency shelter, we are working toward getting a 24/7 year-round emergency shelter to deal with the homeless. We still don't have a warming center or a cooling center in Urbana. People use the libraries, they use the mall, but it's just not, it's not an ideal place for that, and the libraries are struggling the libraries have become sort of the de facto kind of centers for a lot of need, and they're not really equipped to do that. So there's a need for a warming center and a cooling center.
What are those specifically?
It would be a place for people to go, when the temperatures drop to 10 degrees or 0 degrees, and we've got people who really have no other place to go. It's a respite from the cold and a respite from the heat. It's not an overnight shelter, but it's a place for people to get out of the extremes of temperature.
Got it.
There are, if you want to shift gears a little bit, we are trying to, and I'm going to talk about trees, back to my environmental roots.
Okay.
We've lost a lot of trees in the city of Urbana over the last few years due to the emerald ash borer and most recently the tornado that tore through South Urbana. And we've asked people if they feel like they can to help us contribute toward replanting our urban forests. So for $110, you can buy a tree, and the city will plant it, and it will not only replace the trees that were lost to the ash borer, but I want to focus on getting trees into neighborhoods that really hadn't had them before. So there's parts of our community that are very rich in large trees, and then there are other parts that are not. So, and that goes a long way toward mitigating impacts of climate change and improving, quality of life in the neighborhood. Other things people can do, it's each individual working in small ways adds up to, making a very large difference.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You had mentioned the church, partnering with a specific school, and there's a couple of those in our community that are doing that. I would love to hear your perspective as the mayor on partnerships like that. I think sometimes, if you'll just allow me to be frank, as the church, like things like separation in church and state, like we kind of don't know how to process that, so we feel nervous about things like that sometimes. And I would just love to hear your perspective on, like, is that a win? Is that a good thing? You celebrate that. You brought that up. I assume you're for that.
I am for that. I mean, you have to be careful of your tax exempt status so you don't get involved in politics. But on a community level, supporting your local institutions, your park districts, your school districts, and partnering with private agencies, organizations, and the city, I think is critical. I know I've come to events here. You have, I think, one of the most amazing event venues in the community, and it could be used in many different ways. Not in a religious sense, but in a community-based sense.
Yeah.
And we've come here for the Martin Luther King weekend celebrations, and it's just amazing. So there's resources here that we could use.
Yeah.
I'd give anything to have
Oh, wow.
facilities here. This is an amazing facility. Yeah. So I think the especially the large congregations can be very, very active community members, and should be. I mean, you're based in a community, and your people are part of the community, and we are all in this together.
Yeah. So that kind of sometimes perceived tension from the church side, I think I'm hearing you say that's more in my head than in reality.
Well, there are some boundaries, but it's if you focus on addressing a need and focus on the people in need, I think there's a way to be very active in the community.
Oh, that's actually just even personally to hear you say that is really encouraging. I appreciate that. To kind of pull on that thread just a little bit further, I would love to hear your perspective as mayor just on the church's level of involvement with the problems in the community. Our church, maybe just the church in Urbana, do we do enough there? Honestly, are we too self-focused? Is there more that we could be bringing to the table? And if so, would that be valued?
I think it would be valued. I mean, I know you have your food pantry, which is a very valuable service, especially in this neighborhood where you would have a number of people in need, and the nearest grocery store is a long way away. So that's a valuable need. I know you work individually with families through your Hope Center, and that's a good start. And continuing in that vein. One thing I would say is this facility could probably be used in many different ways that you're not doing now, and we could think about how to do that.
Yeah.
Just have a place for people to gather, to meet, to host various community forums, to really use your power that you've got here to get the word out. And oftentimes communication is, and reaching the greater community is a challenge. So I would love to explore ways that we could partner to amplify the message and amplify the need and utilize this this facility.
Oh, cool. That's
'Cause
exciting.
we don't have this.
I'm sure we'll have conversations. That's really exciting. So just to kind of bring this whole thing full circle, I think what I'm hearing you say is we both as individuals can see the needs in front of us, the needs of the education, the needs of the housing and things like that. We can act to meet those needs, and that makes a difference. And then we kind of collectively as a church family can also partner. And both of those are, in your opinion, critical for helping make Urbana a better place.
Well, right. Yes, we can't do it alone. Everyone is facing challenges as far as resources, and we've got some huge challenges ahead of us, and we are stronger when we work together. And I appreciate this opportunity because because we can build a stronger partnership. And some of the other churches in the community are doing that as well. Examples. Here's some other examples of what's the St. Matthew's Lutheran Church and the Sola Gratia Farm. You know, they've chosen to put a lot of their time and energy into this amazing urban farm, and then that food is helping to address the needs of the community and bringing fresh, healthful, nutritious food to the community. Stone Creek Church has in the past adopted a neighborhood, so they've adopted the Learman neighborhood, and they were very supportive of the Learman neighborhood community garden. They had planned a lot of, in years past, activities for families and children, and they hosted for a couple of years a fun fair for the neighborhood. So that's another option, and instead of adopting a school, adopt a neighborhood and really reach out to even the neighborhoods surrounding this church and try to build bridges to the neighborhood. And again, on an individual basis, is focus on the kids.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you making the time to have this conversation as we started. I know you've got a lot going on. Do you have anything just that, as mayor, you'd like to say to our Vineyard Church family?
Well, I'm glad which camera do I talk to?
Maybe that one.
I'm just glad you're here, and I think the opportunities that are represented here in your congregation are just boundless, and I look forward to partnering. Sometimes we tend to work in our own silos, and that's one thing I've been trying to do, is to break out of that, both internally, to build more cohesion and collaboration within our own and across our own departments, but we also need to do that throughout the community. So this is a great opportunity to do that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, thank you again for your time. And just on
much.
behalf of our church family, I just want to say thank you for your leadership and your service and all the time and energy and blood and sweat and tears that you're putting into making our community a better place.
Well, I have to say this is the best job I've ever had. And it is the best job I've ever had, and it's just, I just feel privileged to have this opportunity. Awesome. And I look forward to partnering.